It's Mo. Today I wanted to do a tag, and the tag that I want to do today is the Loomis tag. Loomis is one of the roommates and cats that lived with It Came From the Page. Said specifically that this is Loomis's tag, so to tag Loomis in this one, the tag is all about cats and books that might correspond with them. So there are 5 original questions, and then it says to add your own pets. So I also took some of the questions that I've seen from other YouTubers doing this tag. I took a prompt from the Booktube, Criminally, and Fiber Artsy, which are the 3 people that I've seen do this tag so far. Prompt number 1 is Loomis. Name the most chaotic book you've ever read. The first book that came to mind for this one is My Cousin, My Gastroenterologist by Mark Lehner. Now, I haven't read this one in probably 15 years, but this was definitely the strangest book I've ever read that I can recall. It is told in a very strange way. It has barely any punctuation, and as I recall, the story was super chaotic and bizarre and strange. It might be time for a reread of this one. It's really short. I really don't remember any of the story except just being blown away by the weirdness of this book. Another book that I think is pretty chaotic would be The Raw Shark Text. This is one of my all-time favorite books. It follows a young man who wakes up with amnesia, and he follows a trail that he leaves for himself to try and figure out why it is that his memory has disappeared. Prompt number 2 is Nami. Name the luckiest book you've ever found. So I would definitely say all the books I find are lucky because I don't buy new books, because I only find books in little free libraries or library sales or at used bookstores. I always feel so lucky when I find a book that I've been looking for. I think the luckiest books I've ever found are books that I've heard about, wanted to read, and then right away I find them in a little free library and I get to read them. A book like that was On Chisel Beach. One week I heard about it from Bob the Booker. The next week I found it in a little free library and I was able to read it. I feel the same about The House Uptown by Melissa Ginsberg. I watched a video where I saw it, I decided I wanted to read it, and I found it the next week. So those are my luckiest finds. Prompt number 3 is Wisteria. Name the book that is best to snuggle up with. So I'm gonna just say cozy mysteries for this one, and even mystery thrillers sometimes. My favorite books that I can spend all day reading, that I can cozy up with, that I can read late into the night are always mystery books. The last one that I did this with was In the Woods by Tana French. So I read part of that one night, didn't want to put it down, but was so tired I had to, and then read the entire 300-page remaining part of the book in the next afternoon. I just cuddled up on the couch and read for like 8 hours straight. It was amazing. But lots of cozy mysteries and mystery books do that for me. I have definitely done that with a few P.D. James books as well. Prompt number 4 is Claude. Name the book that has the best adventure. So as we know, I have to always include The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy in my tags that I do because it's my all-time favorite book. I listen to it almost continuously, and it has a great adventure story in it, and probably like many great adventure stories in it. So I would definitely say Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy by Douglas Adams. Prompt number 5 is Jughead. Name a book you love but no longer own. This prompt is inspired by Jughead, who is no longer with us, R.I.P. Jughead, and I can definitely think of a lot of kitties and animals that I've known in my life that I wish were still here but are not. But luckily with books, if we no longer own a book but we want it, we can get it back. Ever since I read Come Closer by Sarah Gran, I've read quite a few books by her. I've been wanting to get her Claire DeWitt series back. I read these from the library and never had them physically, and luckily the other day at a book sale I found Claire DeWitt and the City of the Dead, which is the first in the Claire DeWitt mystery series. If I had to talk about a book that I had that I can't get back, it would have to be this book that I read when I was a kid. I used to love it when I was in my like preteen, like 11, 12, 13-year-old self, and I can't remember what it was called. I can't remember who it was by. My mom can't remember, but it was about a fairy and something about bees. So it was like a very magical to me, but also probably very teenage girl centered book about a beautiful fairy who maybe gets captured by bees or somehow has to spend time with bees. And actually, I'm not even sure if the main character was a fairy. It might have been a regular person who gets turned into a fairy or who gets taken by the fairies. I just remember loving it so much and it being like this magical, beautiful aesthetic in my mind, but I can't remember the book or the story that well, so that is a book that I've lost and probably will never get back. Unless it rings a bell for somebody, and if it does, let me know. Alex the Bookubus had a prompt, Barry. Name a book with a feisty or strong main character. So I'm going to go with Miss Pinkerton by Mary Roberts Reinhardt. We meet Miss Pinkerton, who is Nurse Adams in America in the golden age of mysteries, which are between the two world wars. She was a nurse in the war, and after the war, she started working with local police to help solve crimes. She's become a helper and informant for police detectives. The thing about Nurse Adams is that she's no dummy. One, she's seen a lot, she's been through a lot. She doesn't really like helping the detectives and helping the police force because it is so grueling on her physically and mentally. She's definitely like a feisty character. She definitely like talks back. You know, a lot of times the inspectors that she works with want her to just kind of shut up and do what they want, but she usually takes the investigation into her own hands, and she is indispensable in helping them solve the crimes. So I really love her character. I've read 2 books, and I think there are 2 more short stories that I have yet to read in the series. The next prompt is Freddie. Name a book that was 90% good and 10% not so much. So this is every book, right? Almost every book, I would say, has a percent that's not the best, that could have been better. There's no perfect book, I don't think, in my opinion. So I decided to do this one the other way around. I'm going to name a book that was 10% good and 90% bad. And for me, that was Ruth Ware, The Death of Mrs. Westaway. This was an interesting premise for a mystery where a young woman who has recently lost her mother gets a letter saying that she has a huge inheritance coming to her, but she knows that she can't possibly be the right recipient for this because her grandparents have already passed away and she probably has no claim on this. Despite that fact, because she's in debt, because she's lonely, because she needs the money, she ends up going to see if she can maybe scam a small part of this inheritance for herself, but it turns out that she becomes close with the family and maybe she is connected in some way. So many aspects of this book were good and interesting. The idea of our main character's character and tenacity was amazing, but the execution of it was not anything like she's described. There was a tarot card aspect of this, and the idea of being able to read people really well, being able to manipulate people could have been such a good way for her to manipulate the situation, but she never really used that skill that we heard she had but never saw. There was a whole family connection and family drama and so many more things, including a gothic mansion and a scary housekeeper that could have been amazing in this book. So many of the ideas in this book were great, but 90% of this book fell short. Next is Criminali's Venus. Name the most optimistic book you've ever read. And for this, I'm going to go with The Good Life by Scott and Helen Nearing. This is a nonfiction book written in the 30s about Scott and Helen Nearing, who were professors in Manhattan and decided to completely change their lifestyle, live a more austere life, create the life that they wanted. So they moved up to Vermont, used barter systems to gain help in building different buildings, raising crops, and living an ideal life. This book is not all like flowers and roses, but I think it has this super optimistic idea of how one could live if one wanted to, how normal society doesn't necessarily have to be the way that everyone lives. You can choose to live a life that you want to lead, that's fulfilling to you, that contains the practices that you want to have. I think that this is such an optimistic message to have, that you could live without society's constraints and that you can live a life that's important and significant to you without being foddered down by all the negative things that come with today's lifestyle choices. Next we have Crystal's Maggie. What's a book that you've had for a while but keep putting off? And I'm going to put the one that I always put, which is Be Here Now by Ram Dass. This is another kind of spiritual, written in the 1960s or 70s book about Ram Dass and the idea of living in the moment and spiritual practices that could help you do that and lead a better and more idealistic for yourself life. Now, this book is really interesting because there are passages of writing in it, certainly, but there's also lots of pages with large writing or pictures, and I'm not really sure how this all ties into living in the moment and being here now, but I would like to find out. I've been saying that I wanted to read this since I started Booktube in 2020, and I haven't gotten to it yet, and this is one that I've had forever. And then finally, the prompt is to add your own pets, so I have added my 3 cats as well. We'll start with the cat that I've had the longest and our oldest cat at the moment, and that is Flounder. She is a Skål cat, or a Norwegian forest cat, and I got her in Brooklyn in like maybe 2010 or 2009. She came to me when I had seen an ad for 2 kittens, 2 black twin kittens for adoption. I went to see them, but they had already been adopted out. The runt of the litter was still available, and that was Flounder. She is a kind of cranky, very cat-like cat, but she's our oldest cat at about 14 or 15. So for her prompt, I want to hear about a book with your favorite granny or grandpa or non-binary grand or grand person in it. For this one, I picked Howl's Moving Castle by Diana Wynne Jones. This isn't my favorite granny ever, but this is the first book that came to mind, and it is about a young woman who insults a old witch and is turned into an old lady herself. She ends up leaving the village in shame, but she finds Howl's Moving Castle and her adventures continue. You might recognize this one from the Studio Ghibli movie, but the book is very different. I do definitely suggest the book though. Our next oldest cat is Irving. He is a flamboyant Siamese cat. He has blue eyes. He definitely has a little something wrong with his eyes or his ears or his brain, because he has severe mood swings, and he actually takes Kitty Prozac to keep him even and happy every day. So when he's not on his meds, he can be a very mean cat, and he still has issues with turning mean on occasion. Now, I don't think this is his fault. I think he was actually abused when he was a kitten before we got him, and I also think that his brain maybe doesn't function exactly normally. For his prompt, I wanted you to name a book with a mean main character. And the book that came to mind for this one for me was Drive Your Plow Over the Bones of the Dead by Olga Katarczyk. I loved this translated book that I read last year about an older woman living in a remote village in Poland who is very particular, very persnickety, but can be quite mean at times. And then finally, our youngest cat, Martin, just came to us a few years ago. He is a gray domestic short hair. He probably has a little bit of Siamese in him, and his most notable feature is definitely his white mustache. For Martin's prompt, I want you to find a book that features distinctive facial hair, bonus for a handsome mustache, or distinctive facial features. The first book that came to mind for this one for me is a book that I just read, Snow Country by Yasunari Kawabata, and this is a Japanese book about a kind of aimless man who visits a geisha and the relationship that ensues. Now, this doesn't feature facial hair, but there is one time when the 2 young lovers are parting. The geisha tells our main character that he should grow a mustache because she thinks it would look distinguished on him. We don't see the lovers reunited for almost a year, and the first thing that she says when he comes back is, "Why didn't you grow the mustache?" I thought this was an interesting and significant part of the book because it signified how much she wanted him, how much she wanted to have an effect on him, and how little he was prepared to do that for her. He wouldn't even grow a mustache in the year that he was away to please her. He wasn't going to let her change him at all. Another book that came to mind for me was Invisible Monsters by Chuck Palahniuk. This is about a supermodel, super gorgeous person who has an accident that disfigures their face and what that signifies in their career, their life, and their own personal identity. And then we find out how this disfigurement occurred, and it becomes even more bizarre. This one's definitely not for the faint of heart. That was the Loomis tag. Please let me know if you have done this tag. Let me tag some people. I will tag people with cats. So I will tag Jennifer from Jennifer Loves Books. I will tag Pensively Reading. I'll tag Allison Pages. That's a big channel, so I don't know if she'll find this one. Leanna from Leanna Reads. Sarah from Freshly Read Books. Summer from Sterling Reads. Say Kevy, because Say Kevy now has cats. And Jess, the book freak, and of course, Pistachio. Let me know if you have a cat and what prompt your cat would be. If you want to do this tag and I have not tagged you, of course, feel free to leave your comments. Consider yourself tagged. Thanks so much for joining me today, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye!